Hello, poor people. How are you today? I trust you're having a miserable life as usual. Tonight's discourse is going to be an extension of something we elaborated on yesterday. I ran through the comment section of the victimhood mentality and audience speaking about how relatable it was, how they want to see more, how it solved their problems. I believe it's our best performing video, especially considering the time frame. So I, in my kindness, have decided to give you peasants a sequel. So tonight's video will be an extension of what we spoke on yesterday. But it's important to note the victimhood mentality was confined to perception, which is a very interesting perspective. Nobody has thought of that direction as touching the subject. That's one of the things we receive here. Unique content, not regurgitated concepts, not something we saw somewhere. They stilled it with personal anecdote and shove it to the audience. Every single thing we say here is unique, it's never been said before, and that's why your problems are solved. Perception. Perception, how you see things. Reality would warp itself to match that description. What you're conscious of is what your mind would not just see, but would compel you to take action that produces the outcome. I've said it countlessly. Let me not get way ahead of myself. So, this is a preamble to, or a summary to, as touching yesterday's discourse. We talked of perception and how it defines your reality, literally. Because I recall one time at the infancy of my career, I used to detest watching my videos back. It sounds so slow, so monotone. When I record, I would post no review, no feedback, nothing of that sort. But once I sat and analyzed as a professional, why do I not consume my own content? If I don't consume it, how do I expect people to click? How do I expect to grow? I can't leave my talent to arbitrary things. So if it works today, fine. If it's not as perfect as before, that goes. This haphazard lifestyle, just combining things, hoping it works out, is not something I subscribe to. So once I start with the content that I called monotone, I noticed something very interesting. It was the same as everyone's else. Just so you understand what I'm trying to explain, I was talking about my voice. It sounds monotone. But once compared to other creators I admire, it was the exact same thing. So, what is the difference? Perception. Perception. Because I consume content at a 1.5 or 1.7x speed, it convinced my mind if you're not speaking at that same rate, you're underperforming. For that same reason, once I'm on a rant, once I'm wagging fingers, once I'm blaming people, pointing fingers, or speaking at a very high frequency, my mind is excited. You can feel the energy. It convinces you, yes, this is it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. You can't communicate at that speed. It betrays insecurity. It betrays lack of confidence. Because anyone who speaks at a very high rate is most likely you lack confidence. You're terrified of being interrupted. And even if you do, once communicating slowly or in cadence, It doesn't dilute your influence. It doesn't mean you're a terrible speaker. The other person is terrible listener. In fact, if you have that problem, it's extrapolated to a much wider issue. It's most likely you're the kind of individual who relies heavily on feedback. So if something doesn't go your way, you are intelligent enough to try and change your approach as touching the results. But there are times where the problem is not you. The philosophy is right, the action is right, but the audience or the listener, or it's not yet time to produce that result. Make reference to my teaching, The Danger of Feedback. There I explain, if you're not measured in this thing called feedback, this approach of always trying to change things when it's not working, you would end up veering off the right path or stop something good you were doing. Certain things takes time. Certain things takes conviction. This is the biggest problem of intelligent people. They are so smart that once something is not working, they are responsible enough to get up and say, look, this business is not working. This XYZ is not working. I need to change something. Because doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome is another definition of insanity. Nobody wants to fall in that category. So they change things. It's not always the case. There were times in my life, in retrospect, the action was right, the speakings were right, the communication was right. It was not just the season, not just the season of appearance. That's how God works. It was not yet time. And I'm grateful for that experience because looking in hindsight, there were a lot of mistakes. Absent this level of understanding that will be made, consequently eroding every single thing I've worked for. It happens. And you can also analyze from a different perspective that regardless of how much you think you want to grow, looking in hindsight, there's always experiences to be improved upon. There's always something you can change. In fact, if you look back and there's nothing to be improved upon, there's nothing to change, there's nothing you would have done better, it's either you know it all or you stop growing. And I guarantee you, it's not the first one. So yeah, it happens. I further explained to dispel this notion you have to know it all or you have to be perfect. No, the possibilities in God is endless, but there is a threshold required to start. You can't know it all. You can't have every single thing. You can't be 100%. 100% is not required to start. Consistency, confidence, courage in what you do. How did we get here? Can you believe I've not started tonight's teaching? So, without further ado, tonight's teaching is from a unique perspective. I touched on it in the previous video. How I explained you can fail and fail and fail and fail and suffer and go down and fail such that it affects your mentality. You believe you're a failure. You have so failed that your mind has been trained to identify negativity. I shared the story of how I had someone else book my flight. First, because it involved money. I truly believed something negative would happen, or the money would lose, or there would be some kind of scandal that causes me not to enjoy that experience. Therefore, I had to give it to someone else. Now, these are actions you take unconsciously. Majority of you operate in this system, but because you're not sentient enough to analyze your daily experience as well as watch yourself for negative encouragement. That's why you're where you are. But I was able to sit and see this problem. Why? Why do I think this way? Why do I think nothing is right or nothing good is for me? Failure. Failure. This might sound like parable to you. It might sound fuzzy or even unbelievable that you can get to a point where you believe nothing good works out for you, or it's impossible for you to earn a certain amount, or some kind of external devil or demons or curse governs your life. I respect you, I honor you, and I pray you never undergo such experience. I pray you never get to a point that something brings you that low as touching life and destiny. I do not wish it on my enemy. I don't wish it on the worst person, regardless of what you've done to me. That's how painful it was. And how you do the small things is how you do the big things. This failure mentality would spill off to all areas of your productivity. So a failure mentality is not just limited to your finances, to your relationship, to your work, your casual meet up. You are so deluded that you truly believe you say hello to a lady, she is invariably going to reject. That's how you think. Failure, failure. Failure can bring you to the point where you truly believe nothing can work out for you. You become a victim of life. And belief is very powerful. If you believe some demon or externality is behind your failure, guess what? Exactly. The Bible says, and there were certain people who set their hearts to build a tower, and God had to come down and said nothing will be restrained from them which they have already done. So the only way they could refuse them from building that tower is confusion, to confuse them, to bring them to a point where they believe nothing works for them, nothing is good, you're a failure, you're a victim, some demon somewhere is behind your failure. Let me make something clear. A child who was born from a lineage of a drunkards, so by the lot, he was supposed to do a drunkard and he converted to Islam. Guess what? Exactly. For the peasants on the audience section who didn't understand the joke, the Islams doesn't consume alcohol. So belief is very important as touching life and destiny. The strategy is irrelevant relative to the belief of accomplishment, the belief that this is possible for you. If you do not believe an action or its possibility in a feat, it's never going to come to fruition, regardless of the persistent efforts. Belief is that powerful. Failure gives rise to victimhood mentality. You become a victim of life, the vicissitudes. And once you meet bitter people, people who are very bitter in their experience, they weren't always like that. Life made them that way. If you probe deeper, once upon a time, they had a spark in their eyes. They too wanted to do big things, but life beat them. They got to a point. where the only relief is from pulling others down, being a tool used to bring others forcefully to their experience. I've said it countlessly that most individuals do not care about what you're trying to do, but how it affects them. The success is irrelevant, but it's what the success does to them. It reminds them of their countless excuses, their incapability to persist, all of the shields they hide behind is something you shout at. That's why they are consistently trying to make you miserable. This antagonism is indifferent, irrespective of the character. It is constant. If you were not there and someone else attempts to rise, someone else attempts to succeed, that is exactly what you're going to do. They will desperately try and pull this young man down, not because they hate him, not because there's a personal antagonism, but they truly do not want their excuses to be shot at. It's a different feeling when someone you know, who you used to know, becomes successful because all the excuses, I came from a bad school, a bad friend, I have this, he had twice worse the experience than you, and now the result is his. What excuse do you have? Now you understand why your parents are trying to talk you out of it. Now you understand why the bully is intent on destroying your morale. Now you understand why kids in school are discouraging you from that content page. They too want to attempt, but they are too cowardly to do it. In fact, the biggest haters, I'm going to say something that might get me in trouble. Fuck it. The biggest haters of content have A, either once tried to do it, or B, lack the courage to start. Those are the two biggest haters of content creators. And don't get me wrong, there are some shitty content out there. There are some things that are clearly absurd. And I'm glad the internet, especially the NSC fans, are waking up to the BS, to the psyop, to the bullshit. I'm glad all my fans around the world, once they see bullshit, they call it out. So let's pivot back to the original discourse. Failure can give rise to the victim mentality. For the sake of time, we'll end it here. As always, my friends, it's a pleasure speaking to you. I'll see you in the next one.